at least to me, volunteer, that's one of the things that depletes my energy very rapidly. So I probably will go for another half hour, and then, Tracy will pose. Stand under the fan. I'm not sure we would help. Sorry.
We can show what happened.
No, that's okay. It's fine. It's more just noticing my own energy level. And one of the reasons that I'm actually talking about this is not because, I'm trying to build you all or anything like that, but, modeling boundaries and behaviors that are sensitive to my own sensitive nature, and allowing you to see what I do in order to protect myself and in order to, if I'm going to stand here and give, for the next half an hour, I want to make sure I'm giving for the next half an hour and I'm not sort of oozing because I'm trying to make it stretch. So that's, again, just kind of, I wouldn't normally in the middle of a talk say, and so now I'm going to just talk for another half an hour because then I'll be a puddle. I kind of do that internally, but here it felt important because I'm talking about the trait of high sensitivity and I'm talking about how to manage that trait a little bit and how to do this, in a position of leadership. And, for what it's worth, I am standing here in a sort of position of leadership because I am facilitating or speaking to a group of people, and there is an implied leadership in that. So, what I'd like to do for the next half hour, hang on. One of the things that highly sensitive people are especially good at and needed for. Thank you. Thank you. I think the short one will dangle. I feel like I'm in kindergarten. So one of the things that highly sensitive people are good at is, because we're visionary and because we can see what needs to happen, we are good at paradigm shifting, or at least creating the conditions for paradigm change. And so one of the paradigm shifts that I am most intrigued by is the paradigm shift of leadership as it is currently practiced in this country. So a leadership of power over, dominance, and hierarchy, rigidly structured hierarchy, and moving that in the direction of partnership-based leadership, a leadership that is based on how nature does leadership. And so, again, I'm going to read mostly because sometimes the words I write are better than what comes out of my mouth extemporaneously. So why HSPs? Why talk about HSPs and leadership now? Because that's what I'm doing, and it's not a common thing. So, yeah, once again, out there, like that things that we're not necessarily seeing yet. We need to be out there because we are visionary and empathetic and can see what's needed. But we need to be out there in our own HSP way. And we need to be helping change the leadership paradigm. And my emphasis here, need. This is me speaking. Please change that need word into anything that makes sense for you. True leadership is a holistic practice inspired by the way nature structures very thriving ecosystems. It allows space for the sacred, for thoughtful discourse, for critical thinking, for intuition, for creativity and flow. It listens carefully for all voices. And let me be very clear. When I say all voices, I don't just mean human voices. True leaders are exquisitely honest with themselves about their gifts and challenges. They observe, listen deeply, and learn constantly. They understand projects, teams, communities, and movements, have a unique rhythm, an ebb and flow of needs that must be noticed, interpreted, and tended by a dynamic and collaborative community of co-leaders. True living leaders become leaders because their unique perspective is necessary in that moment. So, an ecosystem-based model of leadership happens to be something that looks a lot like a forest. So when you happen you look at, and I'll just use sort of a, a northeastern deciduous forest as my example because that's what we all live in. And so one of the things that happens is every member of that ecosystem is interdependent. Everyone has to be there. If one member of that ecosystem is gone, then there's a gap, and there are functions that are not being fulfilled. So in an ecosystem, when there's a threat, and that could be pine bark beetles, it could be a fungus, it could be a forest fire, what happens is the outliers who notice the threat will actually send chemical messages to the rest of the members of that ecosystem, saying, yo, there's something coming, prepare. And therefore, the rest of the members of the ecosystem can do what they can to prepare. So if it happens to be a fungus that's coming, and the outlying trees notice that, they'll send a message through the root system, through mycelium, this is so cool, through mushrooms, that are the mushroom roots that are under the soil, carry the messages into the other members of the ecosystem, the other trees and understory, and then they all say, okay, so this fungus is coming, let's all produce this particular enzyme and allow ourselves to defend against it. So in that moment, that outlying tree was the leader. But then after that, some of the other leaders, some of the other mycelium or some of the other understory plants who know how to synthesize that particular enzyme become the leaders. Because they do it and then they send out instructions. And, give me a minute, and what happens then is you have this constant web of rising and subsiding leadership. So the ones who know what needs to happen in the moment, the ones who have the gift or the skill that's most needed, rise to the surface, take the leadership, and lead what needs to happen. And then they come back into the community, and the next person who has the knowledge, who has the skills, or who maybe is the extrovert, because the thing that needs to happen is an extrovert kind of thing, takes up the baton, and they go. So it becomes this interdependent ebb and flow of leadership that ranges among all of the beings within the ecosystem. And that is the way that nature creates a thriving ecosystem. So human beings have the capacity to lead that way. I have actually done it. I have been in groups where that has been the norm. And when it happens, it is remarkable what we can accomplish. The problem is, it means that nobody has enough power. Nobody is on top. Nobody is the leader. And so the hierarchies that we're used to become unnecessary. But if you happen to be used to that hierarchy, if that's where you find your comfort, if your power is how you identify yourself, then the kind of leadership I'm talking about can feel threatening. So, given that model of leadership and that possibility, highly sensitive people are uniquely designed to talk about that, to begin to ground it into other communities, to begin to model it within their own communities, and to begin to lead that way. One of the things, I'm reading a book now, Margaret Wheatley is one of the authors on the handout that I gave y'all. And I did not put this book on there because I'm really partway through it. I never recommend a book until I read the whole thing. But she wrote a book now called Who Do We Choose to Be? Using it all Who Do We Choose to Be? And in this book, what she's talking about is the fact that attempting to change things on a global scale, we're past that point. We missed the bus. It's not possible. But what is possible is local change. So creating these beautiful, thriving, living cultures that are local. And then eventually, they will sort of, as all growing things do, they'll start linking themselves up, and then things will scale up. However, we need to start with the local thing. And again, we're highly sensitive. We don't necessarily want to talk to 50,000 people in an arena, but talking to 20 people in a room, this we can do. This we are uniquely skilled to do. We have the empathy, we have the listening skills, and we have the passion to do it. So that is why I talk about this, and I'm talking about this now. And I'm hoping at least one of you out there will grapple onto it and go out and start playing within your own community and doing something within your spiritual, within your workplace, within your family, whatever communities you're part of. That's why we go to town meetings. Politics is never something I was really interested in, but I have to get involved now, rather than just voting. I gotta go to town meetings, say, this is what I want, this is what I want. Right, so there's advocacy, because you know and you see what's coming, and there's a possibility, if you're working with a group of people who are politically motivated to create a community where the leadership is non-hierarchical, it's a partnership, and then to advocate for those kinds of people to become political leaders. So, and I'm sorry, what were your questions?
Yeah, when you were talking about the communication between communities and trees, my skeptic radar went up a little bit, just because it's a wonderful concept. It's really good. I'm thinking.
Okay, so
I'm not saying it isn't. Is that documented? Well documented any place?
it is. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the mycelium communication among trees, absolutely.
So I where I do.
This is an aside, but I've been reading as well as Amy the Seth material for over 40 years. And Seth had said in different ways that when a country or a village senses or knows an oncoming war or an invasion, the women will start getting pregnant in order to replace those males that may die in a war. And they've done studies with that, and there are actually tribes separate from that Seth concept that women do start reproducing when they psychically or intuitively, whatever you want to call it, know that their village or their people are going to go into warfare. So.
And then that dovetails with the notion of culling deer. Certain communities throughout the United States have these deer shoots to cull a herd, but they winds up being counterproductive. My understanding is it winds up being counterproductive because then the females ovulate 3 or 4 ovum and just have larger litters, and winds up, the herd gets produced and then reproduced and then some. So same thing that John's talking about.
Well, yeah, and that again, that's documented in biology. You can see those kinds of fluctuations. Populations will respond to the environment, so that's called being an open system, and that's what ecosystems are. They're open systems, so they're interacting with their environment constantly. So if the environment is threatening, they will adjust, evolve to meet that threat so that they can continue to thrive. If the environment is nurturing, same thing. They will evolve to meet that and continue to thrive. So, and if you want to know about the research on trees and mycelium, go ahead and look that up. I don't have a study at my fingertips.
That's fine. MYCELIUM?
Mycelium, MYCELIUM.
Okay, thank you.
Mycelium. I wish I could remember the name of the scientist. She actually had me to the TED Talk.
A high-sensitive person, you see them as a visionary primarily, and in leadership role, or can they also be these sub-leaders?
They are many things. So the visionary piece is just one aspect. But if you think about it, if you are an excellent listener, if you are empathetic, if you are visionary, if you can see what needs to happen because you can intuit the possibilities, you then set up a scenario that allows a group of people to thrive, or a community to thrive. So highly sensitive people are need to qualify to be leaders. That does not mean that people who are not highly sensitive aren't. It simply means that their roles in leadership will be different. And honestly, if you have, because of the challenges, when you are deeply empathetic and what's happening is a lot of confrontation, that becomes almost impossible for someone who's highly sensitive. You can cope with it for a certain period of time, but eventually you're going to have to step back and let someone who isn't as empathetic step forward and deal with that. That's their strength. So people are always, you're always working with people's strengths, and what I'm pointing out tonight is what's strong about a highly sensitive person and why we should consider leadership rather than run away, which is sort of the default. Yes?
Do you ever have disagreements within your groups where maybe one person or two people feel totally different than the highly sensitive without feeling like just getting up and running out and saying, "Oh, forget this, it isn't working." Or getting so upset because you feel that they're not understanding what you're saying or not feeling what you feel, and you really feel yours is the way in that certain instance.
Right. Well, so there, one of the things that, I mean, that's gonna happen in any group, whether you have highly sensitive people or not. And remember, that if you're talking 15 or 20% of the population, you're statistically, 1 out of every 5 or 6 people in the room is highly sensitive. So if you happen to have a diverse group of people, there's gonna be highly sensitive people, there's gonna be people who process the world differently. So if you think about it this way, high sensitivity is sort of a giftedness, like being gifted at math, or being gifted at music, or being gifted at organization. So in that room, if you have people who are organizationally gifted at confrontation, gifted at, I don't know, web design, gifted in counseling, gifted as highly sensitive, you have this possibility. Now what can happen is, because we don't always understand how we're perceiving the world, and people don't get that, I literally process information differently than you do, therefore I am seeing something different. There's miscommunication. So one of the things that can happen is a frank conversation about what's highly sensitive. And, but rather than frame it as I'm highly sensitive, you're not, a frank conversation about here's the things that I'm gifted with, here's the things that I do really well, what are the things you do really well? And how do we then pull that to move into what we're trying to do? But trust me, I get the runaway response. And there are times when I'm actually facilitating the kind of conversation I just talked about, where in the back of my head, I'm running away, because sometimes the fantasy is what gets me through. And in a sense, I always give myself permission to leave the room. And I have not yet acted on it, but if I give myself permission to walk away, say, I cannot anymore, and to do it with respect and from loving kindness, then I figure I have permission to walk away. So I'm not sure if that was helpful at all. Okay, good. No, wait, there are other hands. Who did I miss?
I want to reflect something back to you.
Sure.
I love how when you shared about, how we start with local communities, and we just need, my sensitivity is feeling, so I can feel the energy and the vibration behind what you're talking about. It's so powerful. You said something about starting with local communities and then having them be living, breathing, thriving, and it was like I could just feel it. It's almost like the energy in the room changed for a second, and you could just feel it. We each kind of, start to embody that in a small, and then you spoke about it, how it then kind of reaches and then it'll touch the outlying community, or and then the next one, and the next one. Right, so beautiful.
Thank you. And that's one of the things to remember as highly sensitive people. We can be compelling speakers, charismatic almost, when we're in our passion, and because all of our senses are right there, and because we move energy well, it just is. So you can carry a room full of people with you, and inspire them. Highly sensitive people can be very inspirational when they speak or when they're in a leadership role. Or even, as parents, I have watched highly sensitive parents parenting highly sensitive children. If you don't think that's a mess, I mean, talk about a giant bowl of challenges. And yet, I have watched them be profoundly inspirational and watched them make space for exactly what their children needed. And do it skillfully without diminishing themselves. So, when you see something like that, that's profound. Doing that, I'm like, whoa, okay, I want that, and I'm going to translate it to a corporation, Yeah. Okay, so any other questions at this moment? You had one that you were talking to me about.
Yes, we were talking outside. I'm an interfaith minister, and I'm highly sensitive to emotion. I mean, I physically feel them. So positions that I'm put in, particularly doing memorial service, you're facing the room and the energy is so intense. opened my mouth and words come out, I would be amazed because I'm so overcome with the feeling, and I have to really ground myself. So not that I haven't done it, but I've been avoiding it. So I do lots of weddings because that's wonderful. But there's such a need for, what the memorial service and also considering a chaplaincy in a hospital, and I know that would be overwhelming. So I was asking for Tracy for a tool, something that maybe, they would really anchor someone that's as sensitive as I am in the positions that I'm put in.
So here, I'm going to model that partnership leadership thing. And we have a room full of, I don't know how many people are here right now, probably 15. And we have someone with a need, and that need is to know how she can support herself, because it's a role she feels called to do, but at the same time, she understands that her system is not going to handle it, or she doesn't put some kind of practice in place. So, anybody have any ideas? What would you all do? I mean, we have a room full of healers and intuitives and yes.
Well, I would think that I would first meditate and surround myself in white light and be open actually to channel whatever that energy, whatever the beings, just channel it. And through her voice and her words, because she is psychic and she's intuitive, so she would actually be focused on listening to that inner voice of everybody else and channeling exactly what needs to be said. I don't know, that's just what it is.
Okay. So, there's one suggestion. Okay, anybody else?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, I'm sorry, your name is Diane. So Diane is an interfaith minister, and her concern is she's comfortable doing weddings, but doing memorial services or perhaps entering into a chaplaincy in a hospital, the emotional impact, her empathic perception of the depth of people's grief is impeding her ability to do this. She just can't do it too much. So she's asking for a tool or a practice that she can use so that she can help herself be supported and move into doing those kinds of services because she feels they really need it. Did you have something? Go ahead.
Similar to what the woman just said, through meditation, the work that I do, I do this a lot, is practice having a permeable shield around yourself. Encapsulate yourself with some energy. There are times in which you can have that bubble larger, and sometimes you can bring it closer to yourself. Practice that through breath. The other thing that could be a possibility is where you focus your energy and drawing your energy from. If you are focused on the divine and allowing yourself to draw from the divine, allow that to be your source versus allowing all the other emotions.
Come this way
Yes.
rather than come this way.
Yes. So bring it down into you, bring it into your heart, into your breath, and practice, putting a permeable barrier around you just for your own protection. And in that moment, bring it down and out versus bringing it in. Because when you bring it in, it's not going to really go up. It's going to go and stay inside. And that is very
Amy could probably give you a solution better than I, but most channelers, and I've seen many, will get themselves, if they're sitting in a chair, ask for their higher self, their guardian angel, to come in, but it always involves pulling in and surrounding yourself with white light and to set up a kind of barrier to any thoughts or emotional issues that you don't own, but you would be picking up. Like I said, Amy's been doing this for over 30 years. She's really got a lot of some solutions that work for her as a channeler. But it's always protecting yourself with white light, a guardian angel, your higher self, any of those beings that will be with you when you're doing your work. Yeah.
And when you say the white light, are we talking about bringing it from the crown chakra?
Whatever white light, whatever. Just, put it out there, they'll do what they gotta do. Because we're all unique.
I work as a medical tech, so I work in tumors, I work next to energies. Before I walk in, I step into the pyramid of biology. And I ask this Syrian feline beings of life for protection in case there's a negative energy that is opposing its field upon me. But getting back to going into the heart, I breathe through my heart, I expand my life. And whatever that is, whether it's rainbow, white light, violet light. Sometimes I put this around people that are very intense and aggressive, just to, so they're not imposing energy on others. Not to control, but it's just, I do it myself. And it's very powerful and very healing, centering and grounding, and it puts me in a neutral space of being able to handle that energy that's coming in. It's very powerful. So how are we doing? Great. Good. Okay. Did you add something of yours?
Just one more suggestion, or if you'd like to use it, when you're done, you can set up a moment for yourself where you just cleanse yourself. You can wash yourself. And to let that energy be released and let go. And if you know that ahead of time, that might help you get through the moment, because you know that moment won't linger. That you'll have a beginning, you'll have an end, because at the end, you'll be able to take that time and just release whatever you picked up and you felt. And so develop whatever ritual that would be helpful for you. But that might help you to deal with the intensity.
And the fatigue.
And the fatigue. Yes.
So one thing I will say, I'm sorry, do you have something you wanted to add, a suggestion?
I was just wondering too, it could also be a way to simply accept that you're a wonderful wedding chaplain.
I was gonna say, just leave it alone. That was in fact my book about that.
That's always an option.
And refer the other out.
That's right. And I think that's an important thing, because when you are highly sensitive, you have to understand how your own system works. And that's one of the biggest journeys, is to, if you discover that you're highly sensitive, play with it. What senses are strongest? That's why I took you through that one exercise, and begin to understand how energy impacts you. Where is it landing in your body? What are the results? And then you can make considered decisions and take measured risks about what you expose yourself to. And you may find that you can do weddings, and maybe you can do memorial services, but maybe the chaplaincy isn't a great idea, because that's sort of an